Welcome back to Producer's Toolbox. I'm your host, Carole Adrienne, and today we have a really special treat for all filmmakers, aspiring filmmakers, and content creators of all genres. We have Master American filmmaker Roger Sherman, winner of an Emmy Award, Peabody Award, James Beard Award, twice nominated for an Academy Award, is here to share his experience and advice with us. Thank you so much for joining us, Roger. How are you doing?
Thanks, Carol. It's great. I'm happy to be here and see what we're going to talk about.
Okay. Well, I had the wonderful opportunity to see two of your newer films this week, and I've enjoyed all of yours that I've seen, but these two really knocked me out. I watched Soul of a Farmer, which is about a cook turned chef turned organic farmer supplying restaurants, and The Second Life of Jamie P., about a 63-year-old man who fulfilled his lifelong yearning to transition to a woman. And it is one of the most endearing things I've watched in a long time. Can you
But
talk to us?
let me just jump in and say that Jamie and I were college friends. We went to Hampshire College together, progressive school in Western Massachusetts, but he always thought he was a man until one night at age 63, like a bolt of lightning, she realized she's a woman. So unlike many, and I would say most transgender people, Jamie did not have a lifelong ambition for this. It literally happened, bang, like a bolt of lightning. And she started her transition the very next day. And I followed her emotional, revelatory, and often funny transition for a year.
Oh, I did not realize that. And you know something? I learned things about being a woman, I guess you would say a cisgender woman, from Jamie, from the things that she was saying and experiencing and observing. It was really quite an experience for me to share that journey.
I'm
Now,
glad you had that experience.
I did, thanks. I have always noted with your films that there is an affectionate nature to your filmmaking. And I learned recently that a lot of times you know the people that you're working with. Is that part of your...
Actually, it's the opposite. Those two films are probably the only two films in my decades-long career that I've known the subjects of the films. I believe very strongly that it's really better not to know your subject and not to be an expert on whatever subject it happens to be. And as a documentary filmmaker, I've done many different kinds of films. I've done these two films. I did a film called In Search of Israeli Cuisine, a portrait of the Israeli people told through food, conflict, and all. I didn't know anything about Israel or Israeli cuisine. I call myself Jewish. I did a film called Don't Divorce the Children, which is divorce told just from the child's point of view. I'm not a product of divorce. Very happily married parents. Did a film called Medal of Honor. I never served in the military. The reason I think that it's better for me, and I would even say many or not most filmmakers, to not know their subject is they don't know what to put in or take out if they're an expert. I represent you, the audience. And if I don't understand something, I can think and say, wow, this is something the audience would want to know. Example, I did a film called Richard Rodgers, The Sweetest Sounds, about the Broadway composer.
Rodgers and Hammerstein, right?
Rodgers and Hammerstein, Rodgers and Hart. I made a little mistake and I hired a writer who knew everything there was to know about Richard Rodgers, who was the production stage manager in the 1945 production of who knows what, out of town in Hartford. And he submitted to me a 125-page treatment. A
For
treatment,
your film?
yeah, for the film that we were going to make. That's like 6 hours. It was supposed to be an hour film. So I think it's really good not to be an expert.
I like to be surprised, and I would imagine that any creative response to something new is more authentic.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. You know, I can represent the audience in the editing room where films really get made. I can sit there and think, what is the audience thinking about this? Are they confused? Are they inspired? Do they know this? Do they not know this? I think for me, it's really, really worked.
Wow. What is your process? What calls to you and says, I see a film here?
Most of my career as a documentary filmmaker, films have actually chosen me. I haven't chosen them. Um, and it's another reason my films have been so different one from the other. I don't want to try to do the same subject over and over again, but also as a documentary filmmaker, there's not a whole lot of money in it. For you aspiring filmmakers, beware. Um, and so subjects have chosen me, and I feel very fortunate to have incredible subjects come about. In fact, Don't Divorce, I mean, The Second Life of Jamie P. and The Soul of a Farmer just happened to be films that I made, that I knew the people, and they were dear friends. And what's funny is, filmmaking is a very expensive endeavor. And only recently, in the last 15, 20 years, have we been able to have much smaller cameras and much smaller equipment. And there was a time where I didn't own a camera. And my wife said, "You can't be a filmmaker unless you own a camera." And I said, "Oh, but it's expensive. Even if it's less expensive than it used to be, it still can be expensive if you want top quality." And so she talked me into it. I ended up buying a wonderful little camera and said, "Okay, now I better think of a subject for a film." And that's when I thought of Patty Gentry, who is the star of Soul of a Farmer and a dear friend. And as you said, she was a chef that became a farmer. And that film really, it bursts the romance of farm to table. For those of us who are fortunate enough to afford going to farmers markets, buying from the farmer, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. For the farmer, it's a constant struggle for survival. And it was great to follow Patty for 2 seasons with actually a whole year in between. And that was because while I was filming her, Jamie called. Well, she first sent me a text, and I went, what is she saying? And I wrote her back, are you doing a sex change? And of course, I learned a lot about proper syntax and speech and how you talk about being transgender. And I put my foot in my mouth many, many times. And Jamie was very kind to me, instructing me on pronouns and all of those things. And I instantly thought, oh my God, this would be a fantastic opportunity to make a film. When I started making it, there were very few films about transgender transitions. And I thought, okay, let me make this film. And Jamie was going through a very rough time because she had just started her transition. And so for basically that summer, once I learned that she was transitioning, I was both her friend, hearing her sob stories, and I was, in my mind, the producer director, occasionally saying, Jamie, if you decide you want to do this, I think it would be a great idea. If you don't, I'm fine with it. And it was only after she realized that maybe she could help people understand better what being transgender is and what the transitional process is. And then, so we started filming, and I had to be her friend and her director. So she would come back from somebody misgendering her, somebody being mean to her, somebody doing something bad. And she'd call me and she'd tell me this story, and she'd be crying. And when it was over, I said, okay, Jamie, now you've got to go and talk about it. Jamie's a super tech. She was a professor at Boston University. She built houses. She taught physics. She can fix anything. She's amazing. Excuse me while I...
She said complex systems engineering?
That too. Yes. Yeah. Systems engineering, audio engineering. She created Al Gore's current TV. She engineered the whole thing and 2 other cable networks. And so Jamie had, I don't know, 5 GoPros, those little cameras that you can put on your helmet or take around. And so she liked to film from her car when she would talk to what I said, talk to your audience, talk to your public. So after she would tell me this heart-wrenching story, I'd say, okay, now you need to either get in your car or go to your desk and tell the story to the audience. And if she hadn't been able to do that, there wouldn't have been a film, because I'm in New York City, she's in a suburb of Boston, and I couldn't be there all the time. I self-funded this film because it would have probably taken a year or 2 at least to get funding, and funding is very, very difficult, getting much more difficult. And I felt that it really was important that we, the audience, you and me, experience her transition when it was at its toughest. Not to say there weren't wonderful times during that transition. And if I'd waited, it would have been like the other films that I saw where, oh, I had trouble with my family, but we're fine now. Oh, I had trouble with this, but we're fine now. So we're all been sort of past tense. It was a tough one to make. It was a very tough one to make, but it was great. And the helping people, I have been wonderfully surprised that it seems that the chord that has struck the most are with transgender families, because trans people say we all transition together. Jamie had been married for 30 years, had been divorced for probably 5 years, and had 2 grown children. And the other is trans families. I'm sorry, already said trans families, friends of transgender people. I showed my film a month ago at my alma mater, Hampshire College, and there was a young student in the audience, and she said, I was amazed at how similar my transition was to yours, Jamie, who was there. So here she is. I don't know if she's 20, and there Jamie was 63, and she's saying it was so much the same.
One of the things that I personally think is so important about that film is so much of what we hear about transgender, the process, is with adolescents and very young people. And anything you see online in papers today really is dealing a lot with transitioning as a part of that period of life. So seeing an adult, a serious adult, going through that, I think casts an entirely different light light on it. It's not a part of adolescence. It's not a part of puberty. It is deeper than that. And it encompasses all of life, really.
Exactly. And it's so horrible what's been going on to deny teens the ability to transition, to see articles that by adults about a person that decided they were not the new gender, which happens a minuscule amount of time. And Jamie has called it a life and death situation. When I made the film, excuse me, in 2014, I think we started, the suicide attempt rate and success rate was about 40%. When the film came out 3 years later, it was over 50%. And I don't know what the
50%.
statistic is right now, but it's horrible what people have to go through just to try to be themselves. They're not trying to influence people. They are not violent. There is much less violent among transgender people than the general public. It's a sorry shame.
There are so many things that we go through life wishing we could change about ourselves. Our hair, our eye color. I cannot imagine the feeling of being in the wrong body. That nothing, I mean, that's a cage of a different kind. And it's really only recently that it's possible to escape from that cage or to become who you really know that you are.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what's both so wonderful and so heartbreaking. Wonderful because now transgender people can be out and they can discuss it and they don't have to hide anymore. I liken it to, I don't know, 50 or 60 years ago when gay people had to hide, stay in the closet, and now it's an accepted thing. And marriage is pretty much universal. Well, in this country it is. But yeah, it's it's still a tough thing for people because there's something called gender dysphoria, where if you look in the mirror and don't see the person in the mirror that you feel inside, it can be so traumatic. And as you'll remember, there's a very, very powerful scene in the film of Jamie coming back from the what's it called? Getting her hair taken off of her beard.
Electrolysis.
Electrolysis, exactly. And it takes months and months and months and months. You don't just pull it once, it comes back again. It's laser, it's all these things. And she comes back and she can't shave for a couple of days before she has a treatment because the electrologist, if that's the name, has to be able to see the hair and pull it out. So she's out wearing a dress and a beard. I mean, not a full beard, but anybody looking would be able to see. And she comes back and she shaves, and it's this really, really emotional scene that she shares with us. And I think that's part of what was great about being a friend for decades with Jamie, that she allowed me in and didn't say, no, you can't film this. No, you can't film this. I could film everything. And there were some people that said, oh, you have no right to make this film because you're not transgender. And I thought, and as I said to them, but we're friends for over 40 years. There's no better access to somebody than that. So
Your films, from the first one that I saw, which was Don't Divorce the Children years ago, you managed to teach in an affectionate way, and I want to ask you something about that. But even like with the other one that I recently watched, Soul of a Farmer, I stopped the film and looked at my watch. At 2 minutes and 6 seconds in, I had learned something about farming that just opened my eyes. I thought, oh my, I just got an image of the amount of work and the level of work required 2 minutes and 6 seconds into that film. So I've always noticed that you have an ability to really, I don't know whether you're, getting inside the mind or just having that view or perspective on these different subjects and different people. But I noticed that even your camera work, when you're working with people, and I know that this is a technical question because I don't think there is an affectionate mode switch on any camera that I'm aware of, but you do an interesting thing where when you're close up with a subject, whether it's Jamie or Patty or Jamie's kids or in any of the other films, where it's not a static camera, so you're not shooting it like a newscast. And the camera moves, it goes in and out, but it's not that dizzying, kind of walking around, camera verite sort of aspect. But I think there's an element of caring about that person who's on screen with your camera work. Is that something that is deliberate or that you think of in a certain way, or is it simply instinctive as a storyteller?
That's a really good question. I think it's instinctive. I think one could learn it by shooting. When I talk to young filmmakers, I say there are three rules of filmmaking: shoot, shoot, and shoot. And don't try to make an opus every time. Just shoot whatever it is, whether it's your room. And, we'll talk about my book later, but the first film that I have people make, the first video, is to film your room, film something you've seen 1,000 times, look at it in a different way. I am empathetic. I feel for people. I think a young filmmaker can work on that. I think body language is a big part of it. As you know, I'm not in my films, which means when I do an interview, I'm not saying, yeah, oh yeah, cool, because you don't see me. But what you do see if I'm interviewing you is body reactions.
Oh,
Things like that. And that gets people comfortable. It's getting people comfortable that's the most important thing. I always say, I want my subject to put their arm around me and say, come on, come with me. I'll take you on this ride. And I do think that's something that people can work on. I used to do lots of freelance work with news and things like that. I started out as a sound person, and I'd see these people come in with a list of questions, and they would just go from one question to the next, and they weren't engaged, and they did no follow-ups, or very few. And follow-up questions are the most important. I'm very prepared, although it sounds like I'm pretty naive when I come and talk to you, because that gets you to say, let me help this guy. I'm not dumb. I'm not stupid. They know that I know what I'm talking about, but I let them take me on that ride.
You give them that space to invite you into it.
And give them that space. So I'll have a list of questions, which for the most part, I will throw away. Not throw away, but I'll put aside. And I'll just have a conversation. And the follow-up question and the follow-up to the follow-up and on is more important than the questions themselves, because you never know what a person's going to say, and you never know on what ride they're going to take you. And that's why I don't like to do pre-interviews, because if I do a pre-interview with you and then come back and say, so tell me that story about going to Philadelphia and having that great time at the market. Well, you've already told me that story, so it's not going to be as good. the second time. And it's an issue. Sometimes I have an assistant, an associate producer, maybe a producer, do those pre-interviews for me to get a better sense. I mean, in this day and age, you can find people on YouTube, you can find everything there is to know about them. So that's great. But yeah, you need to, empathy is the biggest thing. And then be ready to change in a moment's notice what the questions are and what's going on, depending on what the person said. I did a film. Go ahead.
This is where documentary differs from narrative, where there is not a preconceived notion, there's no storyboard, there is no script really. You have questions you hope you can work with, but you do have to leave it wide open.
Not necessarily. There is, I do write treatments, not for these two films that we've been talking about, because it was cinema verite, but it's controlled cinema verite. If my subject goes off too much, I'm always thinking editing. How am I going to put this in? Is this going to work? Oh, wait, this is never going to make it in the film. I'll interrupt them and say, so let's talk about this.
I just want to mention too, because this is fantastic advice for filmmakers. I'm learning stuff too. You have a book and you also do workshops with young filmmakers, but your book, Ready, Steady, Shoot, is, and you even deal with people who are shooting on a cell phone, right?
Yeah, it's called Ready, Steady, Shoot, a Pro's Guide to Smartphone Video. And I mean, my main camera today.
Oh, you do? I was going to ask you. I see
this is it.
You with.
I can shoot 4K, 30p, ProRes. I live in Midtown Manhattan. There's a 34-story building going up across the street. I'm making a film about it, just with this. And we live on the 4th floor. It's just from the 4th floor. And I have a tripod set up in the window. And when I think something's going to happen, I quickly put it on the tripod and I shoot. And it's been so much fun. Although, you know, it's a 34-story building that was little cute townhouses before.
Did John Lennon do something like day by day with a building going up? Of course, that's decades ago.
Oh, I don't know.
Bigger, heavier camera, but well, that's pretty thrilling. Wow. I wish we had more time, and I hope you'll come back and talk to us again, because this is amazing and valuable information. But to everybody out there, we're going to put up a slide with Roger's contact information, the websites. I hope you'll watch his films. They're incredible. And you'll understand why he is a multi-award winning American master filmmaker. And we are so thrilled and impressed to have you with us today. Please come back. And
thank you very much. Thank you. I thought this was a whole half hour. How do we end in 5 minutes?
It went so fast. I know. Well, obviously, the message is we must do it again. So thank you so much. Please join us again on Producer's Toolbox.